Hi everybody, welcome to my latest video. Well, in this one we're going to cover some very exciting topics. Network cables, and if you so desire, outlets that you can put in your house and wire up to them so you can access them whenever you want. Or if you want to get more sophisticated than that, you could buy yourself one of those patch panels. And the concepts I will show you here today will apply to how you can wire that up just as well. If you see anything in this video you find helpful, please consider subscribing to my channel. It would be very helpful. Okay, this is the cable that we're going to complete. I'm going to be building on this cable on the other side another connector so that this becomes a usable cable. That's about 18 inches long. Now you're saying, why would you need something that short? Well, if you did a distribution panel like near my switch, you may need several of these, maybe of different lengths. So this particular one I'm just going to finish off. But before I put this connector on it, and even before I start stripping the wire from this, I'm going to pick the color of the boot that I want. Now I have orange, I have blue, I have black, I have clear, and I have one that's multicolor. What I'll do for this one is I'm going to stick to my standard thing, and I'm going to put orange on both ends of it because I want to identify this particular one as a Cat-6. So I'll take two of these boots out of here. And you need to really get these on there before you get the connector. So we need one for this one, which we can just run through and connect it actually. We just push it through this way, and then we can just take it. And you see the little area for the actual compressing piece of plastic that's used to lock it in place. We just put that in there. And you have to give it a little bit of push on this particular brand, but with enough force in it, it locks into the actual connector. Make sure you don't break the little tab off when you do that like that and you hear it snap in place. So now I have one that has a protector for the little tab, which is one of the things that breaks off quite easily if you do enough of these. And it also has an overall strain relief, prevents strain of the cable when it's lying inside of a connection like inside of a switch. So it won't hang down and put stress on the wires that's right at the edge of the connector. Now I got to put the other one on as well. I put this one backwards like this and get it ready. Just push it down for now. Now I have to strip the wires. Strip the wires, there's a couple of different ways to do it, but if you get one of these very careful micro cutters and you just sort of get it started, you don't want to damage the wires that are inside of it. So you got to be very careful with that when you push it in. We really only need to get this started. Once you get it started, you're going to see where you started tearing it. Inside of here is a little nylon piece of string, and that little nylon piece of string will help get this done if we can find it here. There it is. You see that little piece of nylon string there? So we take that and we get it around to where I have the split that I've already caused, and now this is where the diagonal pliers come in handy. If you take this and you wrap the diagonal pliers around the nylon cord, you can actually start to use this to tear down along the plastic for as long as you want. Now I only need about an inch, so I'm not going to take off any more than that at this point. And now I just fold the rest down. By the way, this particular one is all solid. If you're going to do your own, you need solid wires. If you get stranded, it's not going to work with the process I'm showing you here today. And I prefer copper. I don't like the ones that are just copper coated aluminum. It's not the same strength, believe it or not, and also just not the same electrical characteristics. Now I just sort of cut around, and I'll even cut the nylon cord off. I take the little micro cutters and I just cut all around here. And now I have a nice, pretty clean cut. We have 4 pairs of 2 of different colors. Now I'm going to show on the screen right now the diagram that you have to use to decide how these wires go into this connector. If you look at that diagram, you'll see that there are 2 different designations there. There's the 568A and the 568B. Those are standards. Those are the standards that the standard organizations have come up with for how these particular types of cables should be wired. It doesn't really matter which one you use. However, you will see in today's cables that you would buy pre-manufactured, they all follow the 568B standard. So I'm going to stick to that. And as long as you do both ends the same, it doesn't really matter which one you use. Both of these, if you look at the way the wiring is, they're not straight through across all 8 connectors. They sort of cross over and one goes next to another one. Those were designed based upon the noise characteristics that are required for Cat-6, because the diagram I'm showing you there is for Cat-6 wiring, although it works the same wiring that was used for Cat-5 as well. Now, if you were to use, just for point of interest, if you were to use the A on one end and the B on the other end, this one is already set for B, right? And if I did this one by A, then we would produce a very special purpose cable. That cable would be called a crossover cable. And you could actually, if you have 2 computers that you want to connect through a network, but you don't want to go and buy a network hub, you don't have to. If it's just 2 computers, it's called point to point, one computer to the other. Now, I still recommend you buy a switch because it'll help you expand to it if you need to. It'll also have some lights that'll indicate to you what's going on, whereas this one will not. Matter of fact, most of the network adapter lights, the lights at the back of the computer, depending on the adapter itself, may or may not show you any of the indicator lights that anything's going on. But it will be. It's just you have to know that you have a crossover cable. It's a special purpose one. Technicians tend to use those when they're troubleshooting things to see if they can bypass a switch, for example. Technically, it's faster because you don't have a switch in the middle and you don't have the logic gate delays that are caused by that. But it's really not going to make that much of a difference if you put a switch in the middle. Now, if you look at the cables, you'll see they're organized in groups of like orange, then green, then blue, then brown. I'm going by the one that's the white with just a stripe of the color, because that's what we're starting off with for the B standard or the A. In the case of the B, though, it starts off with the orange one. In the case of the A, it starts off with the green one. So I'm going to stick to that pattern. They're going to be organized in that order within the connector, so I want to organize them right now in that order. So we're starting off with the orange, then the green, then the blue, then the brown. So I'm going to put them in that order. I have them out of order right now. I'm going to switch to brown and the blue. Try to get them so that you're not knotted up in the middle there. Look down inside there and get it so that you're separated as much as you can, and it looks like it's pretty separated down inside there. So now we're organized by that pattern. I'm going to just make this little cross here. The next thing we have to do is you have to straighten those wires out. What I like to do is you just untwist them a little bit, and some people just, that's all they do. They just untwist them and they're done with it. I don't like to have all of these little waves in it. So I take them and I take my fingernail, hold them together like this, and I just sort of push it down like this. And I go in both directions. And if you do that and then straighten it out, look how nice and straight those wires are now. Look how nice and straight. And I do the same thing, and I'm keeping the first one as the one that's the white and the color, and then the solid behind it. I'm going to stay in that order as I go around this circle. But that's good enough. Now I still have them in that cross pattern, right? So now the 2 parts to the connector, and I'll show you another diagram on the screen right now that shows how these 2 parts work. There is a little piece that sort of looks like a trumpet to me. So if you look here at it very carefully at the end, it's kind of hard to see. But one end has a little bit of trumpet end to it, and the other end looks like a mouthpiece. There's only one way it can go properly. If you go the wrong way, you'll find out you'll have to redo it. And you may jam the whole thing up and break the case. You want to have the connector, just like I have in the diagram, showed in the diagram, I'll leave it on the screen. It has to be with the connectors this way, pointing up. And if you look very carefully inside of here, you will see that there's little knives or little cutters at the end of each one of those things inside the case. So when you put this in, you want, if you look very carefully at the trumpet, one end has an end where it looks like it got wire cuttings in it, and you can feel it with your nail, and the other end does not. The other end is straight. So if you put your nail and you felt it, and then the other end you feel there's nothing there, you want those little notches in there. That's where the wires themselves are going to be resting. You want that to go up inside here like this. So the trumpet end, the ramp up is at the back pointing up, while this contacts are pointing up. It has to go in, just like I showed in the diagram, going this way. So knowing that and looking at the pinouts for the actual pins itself, this one over here is pin number 1, and the last, that one all the way at the bottom here, that's pin number 8. So you want them to go into this little trumpet to match that. So the wires have to go into the wide end of the trumpet. What's in position number 1? Well, it's the white and orange. And what's in position number 2? It's the orange. You got to sort of feed them in, and if you have to, clean up the ends with the cutter if they're not cleaned up properly. And you sort of push them in and through from the front of the trumpet. You got to keep them together, so if they get separated, you got to put them back through again. Positions 1 and 2, just like that. So they're right next to each other inside of this little plastic piece. What's the next 2? Well, you got a different color arrangement there. You got the green-white next. So we got to separate that one and put the green-white next to it, right next to the full orange. But what's next after that is not the green. They do this, I mentioned earlier, to try to reduce the noise in the cable. The next one is the blue. So we got to bring this blue over from across the cable and put it into the next position. You got to sort of hold it in place and push the blue through like that. So now all 4 of them are together. We got the orange-white, the orange, the green-white, and then the solid blue. And then what comes next? Well, now we're going to do the next one, the white-blue. Keep it right nice and tight right next to the other one. And then what's next? Now we jump to the solid green. So now the solid green goes in. Now this one's actually a little bit not clean, so I'm going to do a little bit of a snip on it just to clean up the end of it. That happens sometimes. And then I'm going to feed the green in right next to the blue-white. Then there's 2 more. And then we have the brown-white, and then followed by the final one, which is the brown. So I'll put the brown-white in next, brown-white, and then the brown. Helps to have small fingers, which I don't. Now, if you look at it, double check it before you move on from here. Take a look at all those colors and make sure that they match the diagram for the choice that you did. In this case, I chose the B. We got the orange-white, the orange, the green-white, the blue-white, the green, the brown-white, and the brown. So they're all in there. And this is where having this organized well comes in handy, because now we got to push this all the way down like this, as far as we can, just so we can keep it straight and keep it nice and level. Now take the cutters and trim off the excess at the end of the trumpets. I like to do it in one swoop with the micro cutters. They're all cut now, so they're all in there in the right order. Now I can take this, the connector, and I can feed it in, just like this. I push it all the way in, and you'll see it sort of go right underneath the connectors, and it sort of like locks in place. You know when it's there. And if you look at the ends, make sure you can see the ends of the copper of the wire at the end of each one of those. That's good. Now I have my, double check, make sure your boot is handy. If that's what you want to use, a boot, which I recommend, highly recommend you use the boots. Now we're ready to crimp this guy. And we did it exactly right. Look, we got a little bit of the plastic from the casing right underneath a little notch here. It's right over the plastic. So that's going to crimp. When that crimps, it's not just going to crimp the pins, it's going to crimp that piece of plastic down on the casing. That's important because that way it'll lock it in, give it more strength. I got the ratcheting one, and if you look very carefully at it, the one for, it actually says the connectors for whether it's 4-pin, 6-pin goes in here. That's usually telephone type cables. And then it has the 8-pin, 10-pin, which is the one I have, the RJ45. It actually has a little cutout for the locking piece. So you sort of push that in here like this, push it all the way in. You should see it at the other end sticking out. Push it in a little bit more, just to make sure that little plastic thing is in there. Now I like to hold it down on the table, and I like to crimp it straight down. And I hold it here. I hold it there for at least 10 or 15 seconds because it's actually sinking in even further as I wait. You should only have to do this once, but if you want to uncrimp it and try it again, just make sure that plastic piece doesn't move and try it one more time. You'll see actual instructions that say not to do that, but I've never had it go bad on me because of that. And then you just have to push in over here on this end to get it out. And now if I go ahead and I push this forward and I put the boot on, just like I did the other side, there we go, until it snaps in place. Now we got a nice little 18-inch cable with connectors on it, right? Will it work? I'm not going to leave it to chance. I'm going to get my tester that I have over here that I showed you earlier. I'll remove the satellite. The metal case, the one for the RJ45. By the way, RJ45 is the name of this particular type of connector. I plug one end into the satellite. I plug the other end into the tester. Locked in, I just turn it on. Now, what I want to do is there's different things. Is it a phone wire? Is it a coaxial? Or is it a network cable? I'm going to push network cable. pass. It actually says pass in here, if you can see. And it showed all connections. Now, if I had wires crossed, you would see it that way. Now, that won't fail it. It only fails if like one of them is not going through at all. But if I had this crossed, that's fine, because it may actually be crossover cable, and then you would see the wires crossed over that are needed to make it a crossover cable. But this one is meant to be straight through. That's a standard cable, is straight through, and it has passed that test. Okay, now let's wire up this Keystone connector. On the face of them, they usually identify what type of cable this is authorized for. If you look very carefully at this one, you'll see that it's designed for the 5E cable. I have another cable here. I've done the same thing as before. I have one end already wired. I'm going to go ahead and put a boot on there. This time, doesn't really matter. I'm going to pick a different color boot. How about a clear boot? I think I may have used this only once. It's a different type, a different style altogether. I think these are a bit more fragile than the other ones. I wanted to show that just in case that's something you're interested in doing. So if I push this through, all the way through to the other end, I should be able to just take it and push it through like this, and it joins up with the other one. It's not as strong as the other one, but I wanted to show it. Now let's wire. This is what I really want to show. So with the Keystone connector, it's got a little cover on it. You got to remove that first. It should just come right off by pulling on it. So this is a cover. It actually has little ridges that are built into the cover in order to show you how it's going to push down on the top of the wires. And the wires themselves have to go into these little slots. There's little knives in there. This particular brand, which is the type I will only buy, they do sell ones that are cheaper, but this one includes the actual wiring of the pins. And it has a little A and a little B. A right here in the bottom one, or the B on the top one. And it shows you what color wires, whether it's a white and on a color or a solid version of it. How this is wired internally is not really defined well, but just follow the colors and stick to the B on both sides, you'll be okay. So now we stripped the wire the same way we did before. We're going to take a little bit more this time. Okay, we got our little cross here. Now, one thing to notice about this particular one, the more expensive punch down tool that I got, it's not the same on both sides. On one side, it's got an actual little blade. So if you look very carefully at that, you'll see a blade in there. That's used to cut the wire as it comes down. It's very sharp, so be careful when you use it that you don't touch that and cut yourself. There's actually a little blade on this one side. So for purposes of putting it in here, we're going to feed the wires through the center. They're going to come out through the side. So when we push it down, and you push it down by taking this like this, and you push it in there once you have the wire, and you push straight down, and what it should do is on the outside it should cut the wire as we push it all the way in. Doesn't always work, but it works most of the time. I guess as it gets dull over the years, you got to be careful that it may need to be resharpened if you're into doing something like that, or you buy a new one. They don't cost that much. So now let's start going through them. On this side we have the brown, on this side all the way in, and on this side we have the orange all the way in, following the B side. We got to stick to it. So you start with the furthest one in and you work your way back. So let's go ahead and take these, and we will get it up in there like this. You have to push these down on top of the little part here, down like this. Just lay it across, and once it's laid across, push it in as far as you can with your fingers like this. So it's most of the way in at this point. Then you take the punch down tool, make sure it's already in with the blade out, with the knife out, and push this in like this. You see the little opening, it'll go right in, and push it right on. And as we push it all the way through, I like to push it down on a table. You hear it click, and it did try to, it did cut it, but there's still a little piece lingering there. And as you can see, just a little wire end is sticking out. Now we put the next one down into it. We push it down as much as we can with our fingers. Get it all the way down in there as much as you can by pushing it down manually. Taking it, make sure the blade is on the outside again. Get it started, put it down on the table, and push it down. You hear it click. That time it didn't cut it. Sometimes that means I don't have a good fit. Let's try it again. Okay. So at this point, that one's sticking out. We got to use the little micro cutters and cut it ourselves, because sometimes that happens. If you look down in there, you'll see whether or not it's been caught by the little teeth that are in there. the little blades. So you got to be ready in case it's not fit in there well to press it again. So now I'll do the two on this side, which are the orange. So the orange is the solid one goes in first. Push it down hard, and then just the insulation is a little bit there. So that should be right. Double check the pattern. So make sure you check the pattern that's on the diagram here. Make sure that it's matching that with the wires you see going into it. At least the wires you can easily see. And if it looks like it's matching up, you're probably good. Now, one thing nice about this, we can easily repair this by cutting down a little bit further on the wire. So always give yourself a little bit of slack, an inch or two, just in case that happens. And then this locks everything in place. You'll see that it has the actual things that go right down inside the slots, like it was the tool itself. And you push it in, and it snaps in place. How do you test this? Same way, but now we need a little known good cable that we have to plug into here. So I have these known good cables that came with my kit, right? I didn't make these, they came with the kit. Oh, by the way, I forgot to cover this before, but if you're interested in terms of what type of cable you have, it's usually written right in the printing right here on the side of the cable. Now this one doesn't say Cat-5 or Cat-6. Now that may be the case because it's too short. So let me pick one that's longer. I get this piece of Cat-5 cable here. Let's see if it's even, they almost always print, yeah, this one is in very light pink on here, but it's in there. It's on the actual outer casing, what it is. And this one says, I can need a flashlight. Right there where I have the flashlight, it says Cat-5E. So that's the kind of cable that one is, Cat-5E. So you almost always will see some kind of printing on the cable to tell you what type it is. This one, I guess, is too short. They didn't cut it so it shows. You take this little known good cable, you plug it in here, right? Already got the satellite removed. I'll put this end where the satellite is at. Then I'll take this and I'll plug this at the top. Okay. Now if we turn this on, what do we get? Network cable again. Pass. All the connectors are through. Oh, by the way, I forgot to show you a feature on this particular model, which is why I like it too. The Fluke does an even better job, a guaranteed job. If you push on this little button here, it tells you what the length of the cable is in feet. Now, since it's plus or minus of 3 feet, I think it is, it says that this is 5 feet. We know it's not 5 feet. It's not very accurate on the short ones anyway. Usually you want something that's more than 10 feet. So for example, if I take this cable here, which is an unknown one, I was just pulling it out, and I don't know how long this cable is. If you read the actual description, it actually says Cat-6 on the side. But let me put this satellite on here, and let me put the other part of the tester on here. Right now it says 0 feet. Let's see if it changes dynamically. Here, 17 feet. So it says that cable, this unknown cable I had just wrapped up there, is a 17-foot cable. So that's a handy thing to have with this. It does that measurement based on the impedance of the cable. The longer the cable, the more impedance that it has to it. Okay, so that's the connector for a Keystone, how to wire up a Keystone. And I said if this was the other brand of it, then this would bend over and it would be locked in place here. You'd actually push it to get down to the casing like this, and you would lock it in place. But only the more expensive ones do that. This can go into the actual Keystone outlet. So if you look at it very carefully, there's one little section here that's got a lip to it. Well, this part here has a little couple of teeth to it. You got to get the teeth in the lip like this. So you tilt it in like this, and then you come up like this, and then this locks it in place. Lock it in place. It sort of just clicks right in, and then we have the outlet, and it says Cat-5E. If you want to take it out, you just squeeze that little thing again, and it pops right back out again. When you want to create an outlet in the wall, I might as well cover that now. You have a couple of different ways of doing it, but this is a double gang thing. This is a low power, it actually says it somewhere in here. It is a low voltage plate. So if you want to cut into sheetrock, for example, What you do is you place this down on top of the sheetrock, and you really want to trace out to the corners. So whatever the dimensions are from here to here, you see where it has a dip in it? So you want this length and this width. You cut that out of the sheetrock. I like to take the whole thing and put it down as a template and just draw around it. So I'll just draw around it, and then I'll account for the lip that has to be on both sides. And then when you cut the sheetrock, you use a sheetrock saw, a very small saw that's directly meant for that. I'm not going to demonstrate that here. I don't have sheetrock demonstrated on. Make sure when you put it in the wall, you have these little tongues counterclockwise. Now the reason I say counterclockwise is that when you screw it, it's going to eventually flip this little latch on the other side of the sheetrock. So it'll sort of stick out, and they'll hold it and sandwich a sheetrock in place between these things, between the lip on this and these little tongues that stick out. Now this one doesn't have a back to it. It's because generally for low voltage in your wall, you don't have to worry about it getting wet or anything. So I think that covers everything that I've wanted to cover. Well, that concludes this video on making your own cables and creating your own outlets and actually using a patch panel if you'd like to do that. Now it's pretty straightforward. You can buy cables in almost any length you want, but will you be able to get the colors you want? In particular, the boots. I like to use those boots to represent different types of connections that I have in my own home network. If you want to get more sophisticated, you're going to have to know how to wire those Keystone jacks up, whether they're part of a patch panel or they're individual for an outlet. So just something to keep in mind. Hopefully you got something out of this video, and if you did, please consider subscribing to my channel. It would be very helpful. So until the next time, take care, and thank you for watching.